Everybody, how's it going? Today we're going to talk about Electro. I am Hossman Comics. Thank you for coming in. If you're new to this series, it's where I kind of look at some of the earlier evolution of certain villains, sometimes a hero, depends. But as I've said in previous videos, like something like Spider-Man, that is just written by Stan Lee all the way through it, or several heroes are created by one person, they have a vision, and it's led by one person. Whereas these less appearing characters, often villains, can be written in several different issues, several different series by several different people, and each one of them adds a little something, and I find that just an amazing amalgamation and collaboration to watch. So let's dive into the early appearances of Electro. Amazing Spider-Man number 9 is by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. This is where we first meet the evil emissary of electricity, Electro. Right off the bat, we see him suiting up with some apparatus under his costume and juicing up. So right away, I'm thinking like the story I always knew of him getting hit like by power lines and getting his power that way. Like, is that false? We'll get to it. Spider-Man is racing home to get some medicine to Aunt May because she's sick, as always, and he's ignoring everything. So while Electro is doing all kinds of crime, including robbing a bank that J. Jonah Jameson happened to be at the time, Electro gets his loot and makes his escape by using electricity to magnetically charge his hands to climb a steel building, which of course leads old JJ to think, that's Spider-Man in a different costume. So naturally, this sets off Peter Parker, and Spider-Man is now on the hunt to catch Electro. But when he's fool enough to try and touch him, he ends up getting zapped and losing consciousness on the floor. Peter then doctors some photos to make it look like Electro actually is Spider-Man. And he did this so Jameson would give him $1,000 to pay for his aunt's surgery. A surgery which goes just fine, by the way, leaving Spider-Man available to go after Electro again. But first we have an interlude where we do learn the origin of Electro, and it is what I believed. Cocky power lineman Max Dillon was financially coerced into saving one of his co-workers, and in doing so he got struck by lightning. But because he was holding a high voltage wire with one hand and the lightning hit him in the other, the two bolts of current canceled each other out and gave him these wonderful magical powers. I am a journeyman electrician by trade. He would be dead. But he's not dead, and he built the apparatus we saw earlier to be able to channel his electricity so he could shoot folks with it. Back to the present, Electro is orchestrating a jailbreak, which is something he also famously did in New Avengers in 2005. So that's in character right from the beginning. And he figures since he broke these goons out, they should become his loyal flunkies. And they don't, a lot of them just run for it. But old Spider-Man shows up with rubber booties and gloves to spoil the fun, and when Electro learns that Spidey's insulated himself against electricity, he resorts to using a gun, which also doesn't work, and Spider-Man shoots him with water and shorts him out before unmasking him, saying, I have no idea who this is. That was the first appearance of Electro. We get a pretty solid foundation of who he is here, we learn about his powers and his weaknesses, and we get his origin, and we learn of his prime motivation, which is just money. He just wants money. Kinda seems like he was fully formed from the start, so let's move on to his next appearance and see how he evolves. But first, let's play a game. Hop into the comments below and see if you can guess how long it will be until he shows back up in a Spider-Man book. Daredevil issue number 2 by Stan Lee and Joe Orlando, which is actually some of Joe Orlando's only Marvel work, is the second appearance of Electro and also Daredevil's second appearance as well. But old Hornhead busts up a chop shop that turns out was being run by Electro. Why Electro wasn't in jail, I don't know. But the evil monarch of electricity has a new plan anyway, and that's to break into the Fantastic Four's headquarters and steal their gadgets to sell for money. He can also fly now. He flies now, more or less. He raises himself up using the power of electric cables running inside the walls. Again, I'm a journeyman electrician. Daredevil defeats him. He next appears in the Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 1. I tricked you. Electro will stray to other heroes, but he's honestly never far from Spider-Man for more than a few issues at a time. Sorry. This particular annual gives us the first appearance of the Sinister Six. Doc Ock forms a team of notable Spider-Man villains from his first year, including Vulture, Sandman, Mysterio, Kraven the Hunter, and Electro. Evil genius Octavius' brilliant plan is to have Spider-Man fight them one at a time to wear him down. And our Electro is up first. They have a fight in an electrical plant. Spider-Man ends up beating Max by tying wire around his ankle to ground himself so the electricity will go harmlessly through him. Okay. I didn't think this was going to become an electrical lesson, but I've held live wire in my hand, and as long as you're not actually grounded to anything, it passes harmlessly through you. So, grounding himself is probably the worst thing Spider-Man, a genius, could have done. Like, you know how you're wearing rubber boots and you touch an electric fence? Maybe that's not a common occurrence, but I've done it, and you don't feel anything because the rubber boots are insulating you from the ground, because electricity simply is looking for the fastest path to ground. So grounding yourself, just a horrible idea. Like, realistically, Spider-Man should have jumped up at Electro and punched him while he was in the air. That would have been so much better. But it's comic book science, so I shouldn't be looking so much into it. Anyway, he punches him in the jaw, then beats up the others too, and they all go to jail. And Electro says, you know what, I'm done taking orders from Doc Ock. A Fantastic Four Annual number 3 is the next place we would see Electro. It's the wedding of Reed Richards and Susan Storm. Dr. Doom uses a machine to make the most evil minds in New York City feel that they need to attack the wedding, so they do. It's an all-out brawl between all of the heroes invited to the wedding and so many villains, which happen to include Electro. Hitting the trifecta of annuals, Electro would next appear in Daredevil Annual number 1 by Stan Lee and Gene Colan. No discredit to Stan Lee, but he really copied his own homework on this one. Exactly 3 years after Doc Ock formed the Sinister Six to take on Spider-Man, we see Electro form the Emissaries of Evil, comprised of Daredevil's rogues to take down the Man Without Fear, Stiltman, Gladiator, Leapfrog, and the Matador. Now, I don't want to hear anybody in the comments talking about how Daredevil's got lame villains. The best part of this is that Electro plays it off like it was his own idea. Like he didn't just see Doc Ock try it and fail. But Electro and the Matador alone actually managed to defeat Daredevil, and in typical villain fashion, they allow him to live because they don't want to cut their revenge short. But while the Sinister Six attacked individually, at least Electro's Emissaries of Evil do fight together. Daredevil ends up winning, but a lot of it is just because he was dodging and the bad guys were accidentally hitting each other. Maybe Doc Ock was onto something? Also, looking at Stiltman in this issue got me wondering if Stiltman was a robot in these early appearances, so early evolution of Stiltman is absolutely going on the list. But back to Electro, he would sit out for a couple of more years before returning to his roots in Amazing Spider-Man number 82, again by Stan Lee, this time with John Romita Sr. doing the art. Spidey decides he should go on a late-night talk show, so he swings by their office to let them know. While he's there is a minor electrical accident that Spidey just completely ignores. So while Scorpion had a knack for fighting heroes in their civilian identities, Electro seems to have a knack for making Spider-Man ignore his responsibilities. Electro has another weird trend that we're going to talk about later too. Anyway, an electrician named Max Dillon fixes it. Obviously he's Electro, he's out of jail, and he got himself a job. Maybe he's turned over a new leaf and he's flying right? No. Within a few panels, he reveals that he's simply biding time for the right moment to strike. And then J. Jonah Jameson comes on TV talking about Spider-Man's upcoming talk show appearance. That makes Electro think that JJ will pay big bucks to whomever stops Spider-Man. And yet people still say that J. Jonah Jameson is not truly a Spider-Man villain. We could talk about the Spider Slayers and the Scorpion and all the stuff that he is directly responsible for in Spider-Man's life, but then there's the stuff like this that he's just indirectly there for. He is inspiring others to attack Spider-Man. Guy's a villain. Great heart, nice guy in a hole, villain. Also, he doesn't just inspire people, he agreed to give Electro $5,000 to take out Spider-Man. That's the equivalent of about $40,000 in today money. So Electro and Spider-Man have a fight, and this time Spidey wins by webbing Electro's hands and pulling them towards his feet to cause him to short circuit like crossing live wires. Crossing live wires will short as long as they are different frequencies. But Electro is the singular source of power here, so there's no reason to believe his hands and feet would be different frequencies. They would be the same phase, therefore not short circuit. Otherwise, if touching his hands to his feet causes him to short circuit, I have to wonder, and I'm sorry to keep coming back to this, but how does he pee? Anyway, at some point in the next 2 years, Electro moved to San Francisco to get away from Spider-Man. He also found himself a hideous new costume. Like, look at this. I hate it. But also around this time, Daredevil and the Black Widow had moved across the country to Frisco. So guess who fights in Daredevil number 87? Electro is all about the revenge, because once he sees Daredevil, he starts setting something up. It's worth noting that he still needs to get energy from an outside source. He is just a battery. Actually, a capacitor is more accurate. Anyway, he fixed up an old abandoned generator. Then, when he was just setting his plans into motion, the police showed up. They actually stopped Daredevil and Black Widow from getting involved, until Daredevil came to his senses and realized that with great power must come great responsibility. It can apply to anyone. And how does Electro get defeated this time? Well, he gets thrown out a window, which I assume was just a choice by the creative team of Jerry Conway and Gene Colan, because Electro returns 2 issues later in Daredevil number 89, and he's in his proper costume on the cover, so they knew that people weren't going to buy this new costume. Like, they knew. Anyway, still in San Francisco, Electro is teamed up with the Purple Man, an absolute candidate for a future video. And actually, while we're talking about that, statistically speaking, you watching this are not subscribed to me. What's up with that? Don't rely on the algorithm to keep putting me in front of you. Like, it's been great to us so far. It's been so good to us. But really, sometimes you gotta stand up and you gotta take destiny by the horns and drive it into the ground and do something for yourself, like subscribing to my channel. Anyway, the Purple Man seems to have a UFO, and Electro goes out after the heroes, and Black Widow redirects Electro's blast back at him by tricking him into shooting a lightning rod from the lightning rod factory. So a lightning rod channels energy from its source down to the ground, as we discussed earlier. It doesn't shoot it back at anybody. And also, we've seen continually that Electro takes other electricity to power himself up. So how is his own electricity being shot back at him hurting him? For Electro's next appearance, we head over to Omega the Unknown. How do I sum up Omega the Unknown if you don't know? Steve Gerber created him. There's a superhero named Omega. There's a kid named James Michael. It ran for 10 issues, and then Gerber was fired by Marvel, and there were still some unresolved issues, and then a few issues of Defenders. They just killed most of the characters, I guess. It's worth checking out and is on my long list of videos to make. Anyway, in issue number 2, Electro showed up, and Jim Mooney's art hides him in silhouette, as if we can't figure out
Who's that Pokemon?
it's Electro. Now, it appears that Electro is after a robot that Omega beat up last issue. He says he's good with electrical stuff and get it up and running. I can't speak to that. I'm an electrician, I couldn't figure out a robot, but I'm not Electro. What he wants it for, I don't know. It turns out he can't get it up and running, so he comes back to grab Omega and make him do it. And in doing so, he shoots the Hulk in the face with electricity and knocks him down. And I think that would come back and bite him in the ass. But it doesn't. Because in issue 3, Electro gets the robot up and running, and then he hijacks a telethon to steal the money from it. Omega shows up to stop him, and when they get locked into a standoff with their blasts, little Freddy, who was the poster child for whatever charity the telethon is, whacks Electro with his crutch, and then Omega takes him out. So yeah, Electro was ultimately undone by a sick child, and it won't be the last time that happens. One more year later, and Electro's two main foes would team up in Marvel Team-Up number 56 by Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema. But the heroes aren't the only ones teaming up. No, Electro has teamed up with another villain named the Blizzard. And they've taken some hostages at the Daily Bugle for blackmail reasons for financial gain. At least Electro's motivation is consistent. But Hornhead and Webhead end up on the case, and they chase the villains down to the basement where an errant blast from Electro takes out the chilly Blizzard, and then our heroes double fist Electro into unconsciousness.
Phrasing?
But of course they do ensure they're in the air when they make contact, thus they're not grounded. I approve! That's what I said they should have done earlier. The next up was a pair of appearances in the Defenders, issues 63 and 64. The Defenders were just going balls out on recruitment. There were 20-some heroes calling themselves Defenders across 3 different teams. So what does a whole schwack of heroes need to fight? Well, a whole schwack of villains. So a Defender team consisting of Hercules, Hellcat, Iron Fist, White Tiger, Havoc, and Goliath came across a brazen daylight diamond heist. Like they are stacking bags of diamonds in the street. The crime is being perpetrated by Sagittarius, leading Batroc the Leper, the Porcupine, the Beetle, the Looter, the Blob, the Whirlwind, the Plant Man, and the Electro. Anyway, they get beat up over 2 issues, and we do see that Electro uses his powers to double the speed of an electric train. Then we head back home to Amazing Spider-Man number 187, where Marv Wolfman and Jim Starlin team up to see Spider-Man and Captain America team up against Electro. Max Dillon is once again out for money, so he kidnaps a kid in hopes of getting a bunch of ransom. But it turns out, and I am not joking, that Electro gets sick because this kid had the plague. The plague. But before that reveal, Spider-Man and Captain America jump in the air and double fist him in the face again.
Phrasing?
But yes, once learning that Electro has the plague, he supercharges himself with electricity to burn out the plague, but then he can't let go of the wires and explodes. So that's the end of Electro, I guess. He must be deceased. 1 year later, in Marvel 2-in-1 issue 57, Electro is back, featuring the Thing and Wondar. The villain Solar is in a Project Pegasus prison. He's looking for fellow inmates to help in his escape, and he comes across Electro. And Electro is like in full bandages in bed. He's just a broken wreck, and Solar leaves him there. Now, this is the kind of interconnected continuity that I absolutely loved from these older comics. Not a single person involved in Marvel 2-in-1 was involved in Amazing Spider-Man number 187. Not the artist, not the writer, not the editor. Not a single person. And having Electro in this story doesn't really do a thing for the story at all. It just serves the greater Marvel universe by saying, here's Electro. He's in bed because he blew up. And it even says, hey, this happened down in Spider-Man 187. Like that, they just don't make them like they used to. And that kind of, that grinds my gears. Anyway, Electro being crippled and in bed just seems like a terrible place to leave the video. So, stay hossy, folks. I'm not actually ending the video. I'm going to keep going because something cool happens. In Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man number 38 by Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema, we see Electro briefly pop up in civilian clothes, saying that he doesn't plan on ever being beat by Spider-Man again. He just needs to find some Class A help, which he goes on to find in issue 39. He shows his power by single-handedly taking out Paste Pot Pete, Sandman, and the Wingless Wizard. An authentic Hossman No Prize goes out to anyone who comments below the name of the team that Electro joins in the very next issue. Electro joins forces with the 3 villains he beat up to prove himself, and he joins the all-new, all-powerful Frightful Four. Also, Spider-Man has been a lizard version of himself running around during these issues. But in Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 42, we see the Frightful Four trick Spider-Man into coming to the Statue of Liberty, where he thinks he's meeting up with the Human Torch, but it's actually Electro in a Human Torch costume. But Spider-Man figures that out pretty quick. Spider-Man is soon fighting both Sandman and Electro in the Statue of Liberty. Where have I seen that before? He actually assumes that he is facing the Sinister Six again, but soon learns that it's actually the Frightful Four, and they overpower the Web Slinger, and this story is going to be continued in Fantastic Four number 218, and this time the Trapster gets to dress as Spider-Man to trick the FF. And he actually manages to take out the Human Torch and the Thing, so mad respect to the Trapster, yo. And though Electro does actually take out the Invisible Woman by creating an electromagnetic storm around her, carbonizing the air, and imprisoning her in a sheath of rock-hard electrocarbon atoms. Don't look at me. I got nothing. Anyway, the bad guys do get defeated, the heroes rejoice, and I believe that is the end of Electro's time with the Frightful Four, though he and Sandman would inevitably ally themselves together again against that wall-crawling menace. Anyway, there you have the first 20 appearances of Electro. He's fought so many different heroes. He would go on to continue to fight others: Luke Cage, Iron Fist, the Falcon, Captain America, Spider-Man, a whole bunch. He kind of went on to just become a Spider-Man villain, and again, not one of the major ones. While we're talking about electricity, I want to say Eels also wouldn't give him powers, but it's comic books. But Electro's kind of like a secondary villain, although the PS1 gave us the awesome Spider-Man Enter Electro, where he was the main villain of the whole game. But I still kind of think of Electro as that top of the B tier, but not really an A tier villain. He's kind of just like, his motivations, he's just there for money, and he shoots electricity, you know? Anyway, if you know of anybody else that needs this kind of treatment, looking at their early videos, please go ahead and let me know. Like the video, subscribe. Thank you very much for being a part of this, joining the community, and stay hossy, folks. I'm gonna go back to work.